My name is Rebecca Hayes, and I have spent the last 10 years trying to understand something no parent should ever face. My daughters, Abby and Mara, died young, and the person who hit them drove off without stopping. For a long time, I thought I would never know who did it. I had no idea the answer would come through my other two daughters. I had no idea the dead would speak through the living. My name is Rebecca Hayes, and when I say I watched my daughters die twice, most people assume I am speaking in metaphors. I am not. I grew up in a small town called Willow Creek. It is the kind of place people drive through on their way to somewhere else. There is one main road, one school, one church, a sheriff's office that looks like it was built as an afterthought, and a diner where the same three men sit at the counter every morning and pretend they are not listening to everyone's business. The town is split by a river, and across that river there is one crossing, Tanner Bridge. Old concrete, low railings, no sidewalk. It was built long before anyone worried about things like child safety or speed limits. When I was a kid, we used to dare each other to stand in the middle of the bridge at night and wait for the sound of a car coming up behind us. We thought it was thrilling. Stupid, but thrilling. I never imagined that same bridge would become the place I could not think about without my chest tightening. Years later, when I had my own kids, that bridge became part of our daily routine. We lived close enough to the school that walking felt natural. Abby and Mara loved it. Abby was 8, all elbows and noise, always skipping, always talking. Mara was 10, quieter, more serious, her hand always close to her sister's back, like she was ready to catch her if she tripped. On foggy mornings, the mist would rise from the river and curl around our ankles. Abby called it cloud juice. She would run her fingers through it and pretend she could scoop it up and throw it. Mara would roll her eyes but smile anyway. I used to walk them all the way across. I would wait until they reached the school gate before I turned back. If it rained, I took the car. If the fog looked too thick, I walked a little faster and held their hands all the way. And then there was the morning I did not. It was early September. The heat hadn't fully given up yet, and the fog looked soft and harmless. I overslept by 10 minutes and woke up already feeling behind. The girls were at the table with half-eaten cereal. Abby's hair was only half braided. Mara's homework sheet sat unsigned. "We are going to be late," I said more sharply than I meant to. "We can go ahead," Mara said. "We know the way." They had been asking for months to walk the last part alone. Other kids did. I could see the end of the street from our front window, and the top of the bridge if I stepped outside. I hesitated, then told myself I was being overprotective. "Fine," I said, "but stay on the side, no messing around near the railing, and text me when you get there." "We will," Mara said. Abby gave me a quick hug that smelled like milk and toothpaste. "Love you, Mom." I watched them walk down the street, backpacks bouncing. I told myself they would be fine. I told myself I would just sign the homework, rinse the dishes, and catch up. I was at the sink when I heard it. There is a sound the world makes when something goes wrong. It is not just one thing. It is tires screeching, metal hitting something softer than it should, and then a silence that feels like it has weight. I dropped the plate. It shattered in the sink, but I hardly noticed. My body was moving before my mind caught up. I ran out of the house, down the street, toward the bridge, already knowing and refusing to know at the same time. The fog was thicker there, sitting low and dense like cotton. I saw 2 backpacks first, one pink, one navy, lying on the road in a way that made no sense. Then shapes on the ground, then color, then the exact thing I still wish I could unsee. You read about people collapsing in movies. I did not. I walked forward and forward until my knees threatened to give out. There were no sirens yet, no flashing lights, just my girls, lying in the road, bodies twisted at angles no body should bend, and the sound of my own breathing turning into something between a scream and a choke. The car was gone. All I caught was the faint rumble of an engine fading into the fog. No one else had reached them yet. In those seconds, I was the only living witness. I do not remember everything after that. I remember shouting their names. I remember someone pulling me back. I remember ambulance doors and a hospital room I did not leave for 2 days because I could not accept that there was nothing left to wait for. The words they eventually gave me were, "hit and run." That phrase sounds clean, almost neat. It is not. It is a driver who sees two small figures in front of them, feels the impact, maybe even hears the sound of the bones, and decides that their life, their job, their comfort matter more than any consequence. People brought food, as they always do. Casseroles, soups, pies. They filled up the fridge and sat on the table untouched while people sat around me saying things like tragic and senseless and God's plan. They told me the driver was probably drunk or tired, that the fog was too thick, that there was no way anyone could have reacted in time. They said it like they were training me to accept something I had already rejected. I did not believe it was random, not in the way they wanted me to. Mistakes happen, yes, but after the accident, after the initial panic, there is always a pause where a person chooses who they are. Do you stop? Do you help? Or do you keep going and hope distance erases responsibility? Whoever killed my daughters chose to keep going. After the funeral, the house felt like a body that had lost too much blood. It still stood, but everything inside it looked washed out. The girls' room stayed exactly as it was. Clothes still folded, drawings still taped to the wall, the last board game they played together still half finished on the floor. I would stand in the doorway and feel something tight in my throat. Everyone said I should pack their things up, donate the clothes, move on. I could not even move my hand toward the closet without feeling like I was betraying them. Grief is not a straight line. It is circles. Some days, I could get out of bed, shower, make coffee, talk to people without falling apart. Other days, I would find one of their hair ties under the couch and be undone for hours. Soon, other things started to unsettle me. It began with knocking. Soft taps against the walls late at night. At first, I thought pipes or old wood or the house settling, but the sounds came at odd intervals. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps, a pause. There was a rhythm I recognized without wanting to. Abby used to knock on her bedroom wall 3 times when she wanted Mara's attention. Mara would knock twice in answer. The first time I heard it in the middle of the night, I sat up in bed, heart pounding. The digital clock beside me read 3:12 a.m. The knocking came again, faint but clear, from the hallway. I got out of bed and walked toward it. The floor felt colder than usual. My breath seemed too loud. I half expected to see one of the girls standing there, sleepwalking, needing a glass of water, or a nightmare soothed. Logic knew I would not. Some stubborn, desperate part of me hoped anyway. The hallway was empty. The girls' door was open a crack. No one stood there. No one moved. I told myself my mind was replaying memories and went back to bed. The next week, there were footprints. I walked into the hall one morning and saw small wet marks on the wood. Tiny, bare feet, 2 sets, spaced exactly like footsteps. They started at the front door and ended right outside the bedroom. It had not rained. There was no snow. There was no reason for water to be on the floor, let alone in that pattern. I stood there staring at them until my coffee went cold in my hand. I did not step on them. I walked around, as if even then I could not bring myself to disturb where my girls had been. You can tell yourself a lot of things to stay sane. Maybe a pipe burst. Maybe I tracked something in from outside. Maybe my brain, overloaded and desperate for meaning, was connecting random smudges and turning them into a pattern. Except they kept appearing. Some nights, I would wake up feeling watched. Not in a horror movie way, but in the quiet way I used to feel when I realized one of the girls had padded into my room and was standing by the bed waiting to see if I was awake. I would roll over, ready to ask what was wrong, and see nothing. Then in the morning, the footprints would be back. That went on for months. People told me I needed help, and they were right. I started seeing a therapist. I took the medication they offered. I agreed with words like complicated grief and trauma response and visual hallucination. But the knocking did not stop, and the footprints did not stop. And every now and then, in that space between waking and sleep, I would hear faint laughter that sounded too much like my daughter's for me to write off as a symptom. Then, almost a year after the accident, my doctor called me in. He looked nervous, like he was about to deliver bad news. My mind went straight to cancer or some other disaster. Instead, he turned the screen toward me, showed me the faint shape there, and said, "You are pregnant." I laughed first. Hard. Not because it was funny, but because it made no sense. After Mara was born, there had been complications. Scar tissue. Damage. I had been told, gently but firmly, that I would not be carrying another child. "I think you made a mistake," I said. He shook his head. "I checked twice. You are about 8 weeks." And he hesitated. "There are 2 heartbeats. Twins." I walked out of that office feeling like the world had slid sideways. Part of me wanted to reject it. Part of me felt a small warmth flicker to life in my chest for the first time in months. Pregnancy after loss is strange. Every kick, every flutter came with a double edge. Fear and hope existed together in a way that exhausted me. I held my breath at every ultrasound until I heard both heartbeats. When Lila and June were born, the nurses cooed over them and called them miracles. Lila had a small birthmark near her hairline. June had one on her left shoulder. They were not exact matches, but they were close enough to the old scars my older girls had picked up from childhood scrapes that it made my stomach twist. Bringing them home changed the house. The air felt warmer. The constant sense of pressure, like someone standing just out of sight, faded. The knocking stopped. The footprints vanished. For the first few months, the house was just a house again. I told myself that meant the worst was over, that maybe having the twins gave my mind something else to cling to, that maybe the girls had finally moved on and were letting me do the same. It did not stay that simple. Lila and June were strange babies in ways I couldn't explain away. They were calm, unusually so, They almost never cried at night. Instead, they would lie in their crib awake, eyes fixed on the same corner of the ceiling like they were watching something I could not see. They hated car rides. Most babies fall asleep. Mine would start screaming the second the engine turned on, and only quiet once we were parked. And when they started talking, the real cracks in my neat explanations appeared. The first time I heard something that made my skin crawl, the twins were 3. They were sitting at the kitchen table with crayons, making a chaotic mess of color on scrap paper while I made dinner. The late afternoon light angled through the window and hit the photo wall, the one I still had not changed since Abby and Mara died. Lila stopped coloring and stared up at one of the frames. It was the last picture I had taken of the older girls together. They were on Tanner Bridge, hair braided, standing too close to the railing with matching grins. "That is us," Lila said calmly. June looked up. "Yeah," she added. "I remember that dress. It was scratchy." The fork in my hand clanged against the pot. I turned around too quickly. "That is not you," I said, a little too sharp. "Those are your sisters." Lila frowned at the picture. "No, that is me and June when we were big." Something in my chest twisted. Kids say strange things all the time. They hear words and repeat them, mix up pronouns, twist time in ways that make sense only to them. I told myself that. I told myself maybe they had heard someone call them by their sisters' names. Maybe they were just confused. But once you hear something like that, you start noticing every small thing. Like the way June would hesitate whenever we drove near the river, or the way Lila would drag her fingers along the wooden banister and say, "Do you remember when we used to race down here and Mom told us not to run because we would break our necks?" She said it with the certainty of someone dredging up a memory, not inventing a game. I had never told them those stories. One night, I walked past their bedroom door and heard them whispering. Their voices were low and steady, unlike the usual sing-song chatter of small kids. "I do not like the bridge," June said. Lila replied, "Me neither. It is where it hurts." "How did it feel?" "Like flying, and then not, and then nothing for a long time." My hand was on the doorknob, frozen. I pushed the door open. They both turned to look at me at the same time. Their faces were expressionless in a way that did not belong on 5-year-olds. For a second, I saw something older behind their eyes. Tired, old pain. "Time for bed," I managed to say. My voice sounded light and shaky to my own ears. They did not argue. They lay down and pulled the blankets up, eyes still on me until I turned the light off. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, trying to put words to what I was feeling. Fear, obviously, confusion, but also a flicker of something like recognition, as if the impossible thing they were hinting at was something my body already knew, long before my brain would admit it. The therapist I had been seeing for my own grief told me this was not uncommon. Children could pick up on unspoken emotions. They could overhear things. They could absorb their parents' pain and shape it into stories. She encouraged me to be honest with them when they asked questions, but also to set boundaries. So I tried. When they asked why there were pictures of 2 other kids everywhere, I explained in simple words they had sisters who died before the twins were born. When they asked how, I said there was a car accident. I did not describe the bridge. I did not describe the bodies. I certainly did not describe the sound. Still, the details came. They started waking up some mornings with streaks of mud on their feet. At first, I thought they had snuck outside. I checked the locks. Every door and window was secure. There were no signs the doors had opened in the night, yet the dark smears in the sheets kept appearing, smelling faintly like riverbed. I would scrub their feet clean in the bathroom while they sat on the counter, swinging their legs, looking almost bored. "How did you get mud on you?" I would ask. "We went walking," June would say. "In the dark," Lila would add. "We were careful near the edge this time." "What edge?" I asked once, dread prickling the back of my neck. "The same one," Lila said, as if that answered everything. When they were 5, they started drawing. Kids draw all sorts of things, but mine drew one thing over and over. A bridge. 2 small stick figures. A car. Sometimes the car had lines drawn around it like motion. Sometimes there were little red marks radiating out where the figures met the bumper. I took the drawings down at first, telling them maybe they could try drawing something else. Flowers, the house, their faces. They would agree, nodding. Then a few days later, the bridge would be back, taped to the fridge or left on my pillow. They also began pointing at strangers. At the grocery store, June would tug on my sleeve and nod toward a man by the canned soup, whispering, "That is him." At the post office, Lila would stare at a woman filling out a form and say, "No, that is her. I remember her hands on the wheel." It was never the same person twice. For a while, I wondered if that meant they were wrong and it was all random, or if it meant something else, something worse, that they were trying to show me it could have been anyone, that the real horror was not one monstrous person, but the idea that ordinary people can do monstrous things and then go back to picking up groceries. But the truth they were leading me toward turned out to be much more specific. The turning point came on a cold October afternoon. The air had that crisp bite that always reminded me of school field trips and Halloween costumes. The twins were at the kitchen table again, quiet, in that way that made my stomach tighten. When they got too quiet, it usually meant there was trouble of some kind. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked over. "What are you drawing?" I asked. They did not answer. They pushed the paper toward me instead. It was the bridge again, but more detailed than before. The lines were jagged, drawn with a tight focus only kids get when they are trying very hard to show something exactly how they see it. The car was no longer just a block. It had windows, a slightly bent front bumper, and a license plate with letters and numbers. The characters were crooked, but there was clearly meaning there, not random scribbles, an attempt to copy something they had seen. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the plate. "That is what was on the back," June said. "So the guards would know," Lila added. "Know what?" I asked. "That he did it," they said together. Heat rushed up my neck. My hands felt suddenly clumsy as I picked up the paper. My eyes blurred slightly as I stared at the sequence of letters and numbers, trying to decide if I should humor them or take it seriously. Grief and paranoia are cousins. I was already used to doubting my own judgment. But sitting there with that drawing in my hands, I felt something settle in my chest, a weight, a possibility. I folded the paper carefully and put it in my pocket. That night, after the girls were in bed, I called Sam. Sam and I had gone to high school together. He worked at the DMV now and had a talent for knowing more than he was supposed to. We had not been close in years, but he had shown up for the funeral and left casseroles at the door on holidays, and that counted for a lot. We met in the corner booth of the diner the next day. The same 3 men were at the counter, talking about fishing or politics or how things were not like they used to be. The smell of burned coffee and fried food hung thick in the air. "You look tired," Sam said as I slid into the booth. "2 kids," I said automatically. Then I stopped and corrected myself. 4, I guess. He gave me a look that said he understood more than he wanted to. "I need you to run something for me," I said, sliding the folded drawing across the table. He opened it. I watched his eyebrows lift. "Your kids drew this?" he asked. "Do not ask," I said. "Just tell me if that plate could be real." He frowned but did not argue. He pulled out his phone and typed the sequence into a system he definitely was not supposed to access from his personal device. After a minute, his expression shifted. The easy humor drained away, replaced with something tighter. "It is real," he said quietly. "Black SUV, registered to David Rowan, lives in Brookfield, no tickets on record, no accidents reported. Brookfield is 20 minutes away," I said. "Yeah." "Did he have this plate 5 years ago?" "I would have to check the logs," Sam said, "but I do not remember him changing it." Sam hesitated, then leaned closer. "Rebecca, where did they see this?" I said. "They did not. Not in this life." He exhaled slowly and rubbed his face with one hand. "Okay, that is not a sentence I know what to do with." "Me neither," I admitted. On the way home, I drove across Tanner Bridge. I did not usually. Since the accident, I had avoided it when I could, taking the longer route or just staying on my side of town. But that day, I forced myself. Halfway across, my grip on the steering wheel tightened. The fog was light, but my body remembered the heavy kind that swallowed sound. I pulled over at the widest part and put the car in park. I stepped out and stood there, feeling the rumble of occasional cars as they passed. The water below moved slow and indifferent. Someone had tied a few faded ribbons to the railing near the place where the girls were hit. There had been a full shrine there at one point. Flowers, stuffed animals, cards. Time and weather had worn it down. I put my hand on the cold metal and felt a memory wash over me. Not in images, but in sensations. The way Abby's hand used to feel in mine. The way Mara would lean against the rail and look down at the water like she was trying to see all the way to the bottom. The heaviness in my chest the day they died. Beneath that, for just a second, there was something else, not mine. A flash of panic that was not my own. The sense of sitting behind a wheel, heart pounding, breath loud in your ears, convincing yourself it was not your fault, that you did not have time to stop, that if you kept going, everything would be fine. I pulled my hand back, shaken. That night, the twins were restless. They paced the hallway in their pajamas, bare feet silent on the wood. At one point, I awoke to find them standing together at the front window, staring out at the street. "What are you looking at?" I asked quietly. "He is thinking about it," Leela said. "He thinks it will stay buried," June added. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "The one who kept going," they said. Sleep came in scraps after that. The next day, I drove to Brookfield. It was not much bigger than Willow Creek, but it felt different. Wider streets, newer houses, a sense that people here did not assume their lives would never change. I found David Rowan at a hardware store, exactly where Sam said he worked. He was not what I expected. In my head, I had turned the unknown driver into a monster, a faceless shadow with cruel eyes. The man behind the counter looked ordinary, early 40s, clean-shaven, neatly pressed shirt. He had the kind of friendly smile people trust without thinking. That alone made something twist in my gut. He looked up when I approached the counter. "Can I help you with something?" he asked. His voice was normal, calm, the kind of voice you forget as soon as you walk away. But when our eyes met, something flickered in his expression. A tiny jolt, like his brain had connected my face with a memory he did not want. "I'm just looking," I said. My voice sounded thin to my own ears. I pretended to browse the aisles, heart pounding. Every few steps, I glanced back. Once, I caught him staring. His jaw was tight. The hand that held the receipt scanner shook slightly. On my way out, I forced myself to walk back up to the counter. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you ever drive through Willow Creek?" He swallowed. There it was again, that flicker. Guilt, startled and poorly buried. "Sometimes," he said. "Why?" "There was a bad accident there a few years back. 2 little girls on the bridge." He cleared his throat. "I heard about that. Terrible thing." "Did you hear they never found the driver?" I asked. His eyes darted to the window, then back to me. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Some people should not be on the road," he said. "Anyway, I hope they got what they deserved." The words were wrong. Too smooth, too practiced. The way someone talks when they've rehearsed a line in their head, trying to see if it can pass for truth. That was all I needed. I left the store and sat in my car with my hands shaking on the wheel. You can tell yourself all kinds of stories to make living with yourself easier. It was dark. I was tired. They came out of nowhere. I panicked. I had to think of my own family. I did what anyone would have done. David Rowan had years to tell the truth. Every time he drove over a bridge or saw a child in a crosswalk or heard about another accident on the news, he had a chance to come forward. He never did. It did not bring my girls back. It did not undo what he had done. But knowing finally who had taken them gave a shape to my anger. It also gave Abby and Mara something to focus on. Because after that day, the haunting changed. The twins had always been unusual. After my trip to Brookfield, they became something else. They slept-walked more often. I would wake up at 2 or 3 and find their beds empty. Most of the time, they were in the hallway, hands pressed to the walls, whispering. Once, I found them standing back to back in the kitchen, eyes closed, breathing perfectly in sync. When I guided them back to bed, their skin felt colder than it should. During the day, they seemed more themselves, but sharp edges kept showing through. June would stop mid-play and stare into space, eyes unfocused, lips moving silently. Lila's drawings grew more detailed. She started sketching not just the bridge, but a man's face. At first, it was vague, but with each new drawing, the features became clearer. The first time I recognized David's eyes on the paper, my breath caught. "We saw him yesterday," June said when she noticed the way I stared. "He was thinking about running again." "Running where?" I asked. "Anywhere," Lila said. "Anywhere that is not the truth." There is a line between wanting justice and wanting revenge. I had spent years on the safe side of it, telling myself I only wanted answers, not punishment. But watching my living daughters carry the weight of my dead ones, watching a man who killed them walk freely through aisles of paint and nails and garden tools, that line began to blur. One night, just before dawn, I woke to the sound of the front door slamming open. My body went from sleep to full alert so fast my muscles cramped. I ran to the hallway. The door was indeed open, cold air gusting in. The twins were halfway down the driveway, barefoot, moving with calm purpose toward the street. "Leela! June!" My voice came out hoarse. "Stop!" They did not respond. Their heads were tilted slightly, like they were listening to something I could not hear. I sprinted after them, heart thudding in my throat. By the time I caught up to them, they were at the corner, about to step into the road. I grabbed their shoulders and turned them around. Their eyes looked wrong. Not empty, exactly, but layered. Like there was another pair of eyes behind theirs, looking out from a distance. "It is not time," June said softly. "We were just checking," Lila added. "Checking what?" I asked. "That it is still there," they said together. "The bridge," June clarified after a beat, as if I might be slow to catch up. I walked them back to the house, fingers digging into their small arms a little harder than I should have. Once inside, I locked the door and slid the deadbolt. Then I added a chain above it, high enough they could not reach. That morning, when the sun was up and the world felt slightly less like it was tilting sideways, I called their pediatrician and scheduled another evaluation. The doctors were kind, but their words all sounded like versions of the same thing. Children are sensitive. Children act out their parents' unprocessed grief. Children sometimes adopt pieces of stories and make them their own. Trauma echoes across generations. None of them had an explanation for muddy feet that appeared despite locked doors, or for drawings of license plates that matched real cars, or for the way my daughters' voices would occasionally layer, two tones coming from one mouth when they spoke about the bridge. One evening, after another long day of tests and polite dismissal, I sat at the kitchen table feeling hollow. The twins were upstairs. The house was too quiet. The chairs across from me sat empty, but for a moment, I could almost see Abby slumped in one, complaining about homework, and Mara carefully aligning her crayons by color in the other. The ache of missing them was almost physical.
"I do not know what you want from me," I said aloud before I could stop myself. My voice cracked. "I am trying. I am listening. What else am I supposed to do?" For a second, nothing changed. Then the air in the room shifted. Not colder exactly, but denser. The candle on the table flickered. I heard the faint pad of small feet in the hallway, even though I knew the twins were upstairs. The sensation of being watched settled over me, familiar but sharper. In my mind's eye, I saw the bridge, not the way it was now, but as it had been that morning. The fog, the car, the split second where the driver decided his life mattered more than theirs. Then, overlaying that, I saw him, David, older now, maybe, but still the same man. sitting alone at his kitchen table in a neat house in Brookfield, a glass of something strong in his hand, staring at nothing. And then, behind him, two small figures watching. It was not a vision in the movie sense. It was more like an impression, a thought that did not feel like it came from me. But it was enough. "You are not asking me to forget," I whispered. "You are asking me not to." The next day, rain lashed the town. Willow Creek always looked smaller in bad weather, like it was folding in on itself. I kept the twins home from school. They sat on the floor with puzzles while I cleaned and tried not to think too hard. Mid-afternoon, the phone rang. It was Sam. "You need to see this," he said. He sent me a link to a regional news site. There had been a minor accident on a highway near Brookfield. Nothing fatal. A car had skidded on wet roads and slammed into the median. No one was hurt, but the driver was cited for reckless driving and leaving his lane. His name was David Rowan. I stared at the article. The photo with it showed the front of his SUV, dented and cracked. The damage did not match the angle the girls had been hit from, but the sight of it still made my stomach churn. "He is slipping," Sam said quietly when I called him back. "Maybe this kind of thing does not stay buried forever. Maybe it just needs a push," I said. That night, the twins were calm in a way I had not seen in years. They ate their dinner without staring off into nowhere. They laughed at a silly cartoon. They went to bed easily. Around midnight, though, I woke up with the heavy certainty that something was about to happen. I opened my eyes and saw them both standing in the doorway of my room. The hallway light behind them cast their faces in shadow, but I could see the outline of their features. For a second, in the way all shadows can play tricks, I thought I saw Abby's high cheekbones on Leela's face and Mara's narrowed gaze on June's. "What is wrong?" I asked, my voice low. "It is time," Leela said. "He is coming," June added. I sat up fully. "Coming where?" "To the bridge," they said together. "Where else?"
The next day began like any other, which somehow made it worse. The sky was clear. The air had that crisp edge that comes just before winter settles in properly. People went to work, opened shops, bought coffee. I could have gone on with my day and pretended my daughters had not stood in my doorway with voices that were not entirely theirs. I could have taken them to school and sent politely worded emails demanding justice from systems that had already failed us once. Instead, mid-morning, I found myself packing a small bag with snacks, water, and extra sweaters. "We are going for a walk," June asked. "Where?" Leela added. "You already know," I said. They did not argue. We left the house after lunch. The twins walked on either side of me, hands in mine, small fingers cold despite their gloves. As we neared Tanner Bridge, I felt their grips tighten. The river below gurgled softly. The sunlight made the surface look almost friendly. The bridge itself looked unchanged. Concrete, railings, faded ribbons tied to one section. A place like any other, if you did not know what had happened there. My chest felt heavy. Part of me wanted to turn back. The other part, the one that had been listening to knocks and footsteps and whispers for years, knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We reached the center of the bridge. The twins stopped. "Here," Leela said. "This is where we remember the most," June added. I opened my mouth to ask what that meant, but the answer came in a different form. The air shifted. It was warm enough that day, but all at once a chill moved through me, like walking from sun into shadow. The hairs on my arms rose under my sleeves. The world seemed quiet. No distant cars, no birds, just the faint rush of water. Fog rolled in without warning, pouring over the sides of the bridge as if someone had opened a door in the sky. In seconds, the ends of the span were swallowed. We stood in a bubble of gray. The twins let go of my hands and stepped forward. I reached for them, panic flaring, but something held me back. Not a physical force, just a sense that if I interfered now, I would break something delicate and important. "Do not go too close to the edge," I managed to say. "We know," they answered. Headlights cut through the fog. The shape of an SUV emerged, moving slower than normal, as if the driver was wary of the sudden low visibility. For a moment, I thought it might be someone else, just another car on another day. Then I got close enough that I saw the plate. The same sequence of letters and numbers Leela had drawn. The vehicle crawled toward us, then stopped 20 feet away. Through the glass, I saw his face. David Rowan looked smaller than he had in the hardware store. Maybe it was the way the fog diffused the light, or the way fear had hollowed his features. His hands were clenched on the wheel. We stood there, 3 figures in the middle of the bridge, staring at him. He stared back. He rolled down his window a few inches. "What are you doing there?" "You would know," I replied. Something like recognition flashed in his eyes, not of me specifically, but of the kind of conversation he had been outrunning his entire life. "I do not know what you think this is about, but I have somewhere to be." He shifted in his seat, like he was going to put the car in reverse. The engine sputtered. Then the twins spoke. Their voices rose together, layered and echoing off the concrete in a way that made the air vibrate. "You hit us," they said. "You saw us. You left." David flinched as if struck. "I do not know what you were talking about." But it came out too fast, too rehearsed. "You pressed the pedal harder. You watched the fog swallow us in the mirror. You told yourself you had no choice." The SUV's headlights flickered. The fog thickened around it, curling like fingers. "Stop it," he snapped. "Whatever game this is, stop." The twins took another step forward. Their shoulders were squared. Their faces looked older than they should. For a heartbeat, I saw Abby's stubborn set to the jaw and Mara's quiet fury overimposed on their features. "We called for help," Leela said. "No one came," June added. "Not fast enough. You drove home, you washed the car, you swallowed the story whole and pretended it was not real. But we remembered." As they spoke, the temperature dropped further. My breath came out in pale puffs. The metal of the railing beside me felt icy. David tried to open his door. It would not budge. His gaze jerked down as if he could not believe it. "Get away from my car," he ordered, but his voice had lost any claim to authority. The twins did not move back. They raised their hands instead and placed their small palms flat against the driver's side door. For a second, nothing happened. Then, slowly, water began to seep from the edges of their hands, trickling down the metal in thin streams. Where it went, tiny footprints formed, not on the ground, but on the surface of the door itself, as if someone inside was stepping against it. David's eyes went wide. "God, no!" The engine roared to life on its own. His feet were visibly away from the pedals. The gear shifter moved, jerked, slid into reverse with a loud clunk. The car lurched backward. The wheels screeched against the damp concrete, leaving dark streaks. The SUV rolled toward the railing. David scrabbled for control, grabbing the wheel, stomping on the brakes, but the motion did not match the movement. Something else was guiding it. "Please," he shouted, voice cracking. "Please, I am sorry. I panicked. I was young. I did not know what to do. I think about it every day. Is that not enough?" "No," the girl said simply. The back wheels hit the rail. Concrete groaned. A crack split along the base, radiating outward like veins. For a moment, the SUV teetered, balanced between the weight of the past and the pull of gravity. David looked at me through the windshield. His eyes were wild. He reached one hand out as if I might somehow save him. "Help me," he begged. "Please, you do not want this on your conscience." I thought of my daughters lying in the fog. I thought of footprints in my hallway. I thought of years spent waking to knocking and nothing, and telling myself it was all in my head because the alternative was too big to hold. You had 10 years to worry about consciences. You started with none. The SUV tipped. It went over the edge slower than I expected, nose dipping toward the water. For a second, it hung there, almost as if the world was giving him one last chance to feel exactly how they had felt in that weightless moment between impact and ground. Then it dropped. The splash was loud and final. Water surged up, hit the underside of the bridge, and rained down in cold sheets around us. I flinched as droplets hit my face. They smelled like river mud and rust and something else. Relief, maybe. Below, the SUV sank. The river was not deep enough to hide it completely. A corner of metal jutted up, catching the light. The fog began to thin. The twins stepped back from the edge. Their faces looked different, softer. The tension in their shoulders melted. For the first time since they were born, they looked exactly their age. "We can rest now," Leela said. "You can too," June added, looking up at me. There were sirens eventually. Someone had seen the fog and stopped further up the road. Someone had called it in. There were questions and statements and investigations. I did not lie. Not exactly. I told them the truth they would accept. The driver lost control on the wet surface. The brakes failed. He panicked and overcorrected. I tried to wave him down. I could not reach him in time. No one believed it was just an accident. Not entirely. There had been the old case on this same bridge, the unsolved hit and run. There were people who remembered seeing David's SUV with unexplained damage years ago. There was a mechanic who eventually came forward and mentioned repairs that had never sat right with him. Sam dug up old logs. The pattern snapped into place. The official story became one of delayed justice. The man who had killed 2 children by mistake had finally faced consequences, even if the courts had never touched him. Only I knew it was not the full story. Only I knew that sometimes justice needed hands that were not entirely alive anymore to move it along. Our house grew quiet after that. No more knocking, no more footprints. No more midnight standing in doorways with shadowed faces. Lila and June still remembered pieces of the strange years. They would occasionally ask, in the gentle way kids do when they are testing how much they are allowed to say, if I thought people could come back after they die. I think sometimes love makes echoes. I would answer. And sometimes the things we do leave marks. And sometimes, if something is important enough, it finds its way back until someone listens. It was not a textbook explanation, but it was the closest I could get to the truth. They did not talk about the bridge much. When we had to cross it, they held my hands and looked straight ahead. It became just part of the road again, not an altar. The ribbons on the railing were replaced with fresh ones after David's car was finally pulled from the river. People came with flowers again, shaking their heads, saying things like full circle and karma. I stood a little apart, watching my daughters chase each other in the grass near the riverbank, their laughter rising and falling with the wind. I would always miss Abby and Mara. That grief settled into me like a new bone. But the sharpness of it had dulled into something I could carry without cutting myself every time I moved. Some nights, I still woke at 3 and listened for footsteps. When I heard only the quiet creaks of an old house, a different kind of ache moved through me. Relief and loss wrapped together. People like to say the dead move on when they are ready. I do not think it is that simple. I think sometimes they stay because something is unfinished, because a story was forced to stop mid-sentence, and the weight of that silence is too heavy to leave behind. Abby and Mara did not come back to scare me. They did not haunt their sisters out of malice. They held on until the truth had a chance to breathe, until someone finally said, out loud and with no excuses, what had really happened on that bridge. After that, they let go. I do not know what comes next for them. I hope it is soft. I hope there are no cars or fog or men who convince themselves mistakes are not their fault. I hope if they come back again in some other form, they remember only the good parts. What I know is this. Some actions echo longer than a lifetime. Some choices stain more than one life. And sometimes, when the living refuse to carry that truth, the dead do it for them, for as long as they have to. If this story pulled at you, or made your chest feel heavy in that way you can't quite explain, take a second to like this video and subscribe to Death Rehaunt. Here, we tell the kinds of stories that ask what really happens when a life is cut short and a soul does not accept that the story is over. Tell me in the comments what you think. Do you believe some souls come back for revenge, or just to be heard one last time?